So every week in my GP clinic, I saw the same patient, but just in a different body. Not the same diagnosis, not even the same symptoms, but the same situation. Someone who had been doing everything their doctor, who was actually me, told them to do for years. Taking their medication, attending our appointments, following my advice, and still not getting any better. Still exhausted, still inflamed, still anxious, still carrying this quiet sense that something was fundamentally wrong with them and that the system had the answers. If they could just find the right specialist or the right test or the right prescription. And here is the thing that nobody, least of all me, was able to say to them in the 20 minutes of consultation time. And that is, the system was not built to make you well. It was built to manage you, to measure what might go wrong, not to build what makes you well. And there is a very significant difference between all of those things. So I am Dr. Jen Draper, former general practitioner, medical longevity strategist, and creator of the Insourcing method. I spent 28 years inside that system. I left in 2024. And what I do today is I break down exactly how modern healthcare was designed, why it creates dependency instead of capability, and what you can actually do to stop being a passenger in your own health and instead become part of the crew. Because once you comprehend this, you cannot go back to sitting in the passenger seat. Now, the problem is not your doctor. I want to be clear about that before anything else. Most GPs are working in a system that gives them 10 to 15 minutes per patient, a prescribing framework built around symptom management, and almost no structural support for prevention, education, or behavioural change. Or if that structure is there, it's based upon industry-funded public health initiatives that support particular paradigms of interventions that just reinforce the dependency and fear. Your doctor is not the enemy. The system architecture is. And that architecture has produced something very specific in patients. A learned pattern of outsourcing, a deep conditioning that says, my body is a problem for an expert to solve. My symptoms are data for someone else to interpret. My health is something that happens to me, not something I participate in. I saw this every single day. People who were highly capable, intelligent, successful in every other domain of their lives, who could not name their own medications or tell me what they were actually prescribed for. People who had been told they had a condition and taken on that condition as an identity and never once questioned whether the condition was reversible or whether the lifestyle changes that created it could be the same lever that dismantled it. Now, that is not stupidity. That is a system that was designed to produce compliance, not capability. And today, I'm going to break down exactly how that happened and what it costs you. Problem number one. The system profits from your return to the system, to your next appointment, but not from your recovery. In most Western healthcare systems, the incentive structure is built around visits, prescriptions, procedures, and referrals. There is no item number or billing code for keeping someone so well they need never come back. There is no Medicare item for teaching someone how to comprehend their own blood results, advocate in a specialist appointment, or recalibrate before a lifestyle pattern becomes a diagnosis. Here's what this produces, physiologically and psychologically over time. When you are repeatedly told that your body's signals require an expert to interpret, your nervous system stops trusting its own data. The interoceptive pathway, which is your body's capacity to sense its internal state and generate appropriate responses, essentially just goes offline as a useful guide. You override it. You wait for external confirmation before you act on what you already know. Your stress response stays elevated because your nervous system is operating without a reliable feedback loop. It is constantly scanning for external permission to feel safe or well or functional. You develop what the research calls learned helplessness in the health domain. And learned helplessness does not stay contained. It bleeds into decision making, into relationships, into how you lead yourself at your work, because the pattern is the pattern. It does not compartmentalize neatly. And then the cruel irony. Your health gets worse, not because the system failed you in an obvious way, because it kept you just functional enough to keep returning for those appointments. Problem number 2, you were never taught to be an active participant in your own health. At no point in the patient journey is the average individual given a framework for health literacy. For example, for comprehending their own pathology reports, for knowing which questions are appropriate to ask in a specialist appointment, for recognizing when a prescription is managing a symptom versus addressing a cause. This is not an accident. Health literacy is not incentivized. What I saw over and over again in 28 years of clinical medicine was the gap between what patients comprehended and what they needed to comprehend to actually advocate for themselves. People who had been managing a condition for years and had never been told that the condition was downstream of a pattern, that the pattern had a name, that the pattern could be recalibrated. I wanted to educate people in this frame, but it was not incentivized, and time is finite. So this is what chronic health illiteracy does in your body and in your nervous system. Even if you want to get comprehension, when you cannot comprehend the language of your own health, you cannot participate in the decisions being made about it. You sign consent forms that you don't fully get. You accept diagnoses without context, and you follow treatment plans without knowing what success looks like or when to question whether the plan is still appropriate. Your nervous system registers this as a chronic low-level threat, not the acute threat of an emergency, the diffuse, ongoing threat of not being in charge of something that profoundly affects your survival. That is a significant and sustained cortisol load, and it compounds over time. Women, in particular, carry a double layer of this. Because the medical system was historically built on research conducted primarily on male subjects, female symptoms were pathologized differently, dismissed more frequently. medicated for anxiety when the real signal was hormonal, autoimmune, or cardiovascular. So many women I saw in practice had been told their symptoms were in their head for years before anyone looked properly. That does not build self-trust. It does build self-doubt. Problem number 3. A diagnosis is not an identity, but the system treats it like one. And when you receive one, it's very difficult to not slip into that identity. But this is the part that nobody says clearly enough. When you receive a diagnosis, the system attaches a label to a cluster of symptoms. Now, that label is useful for treatment pathways and insurance billing, but it is not a life sentence, and it is almost never the full story. But here is what happens in the room. You walk in with symptoms, you walk out with a name for them. And from that point forward, every interaction with the healthcare system, every conversation with family, every Google search at 2 a.m. is filtered through that name. I am a diabetic. I am an anxious person. I have chronic fatigue. I have ADHD. The label becomes the identity. The identity becomes the story. The story becomes the nervous system's default operating framework. And a nervous system organized around a fixed identity has no reason to recalibrate, because recalibration would threaten that story. Now, this is not weakness. This is neuroscience. Identity level threats activate the same neural circuitry as physical threats. Your brain will protect a coherent story about who you are, even when that story is making you sick. The system created this by providing the label without the context, prescribing the treatment without addressing the cause, by measuring success as symptom reduction rather than actual restoration of function and self-determination. So before I go any further, a quick one. YouTube tells me most people who are watching are not subscribed. So if this is landing for you, hit subscribe now. And this channel really exists for people who are done being managed and who are ready to comprehend how to actually navigate their own health. New content drops regularly. Takes 2 seconds. Subscribe and click that bell notification button, and you'll be notified each time I drop new content. So, how did we get here? This is not new. This is structural, and it's been built over approximately about a century. So, before industrialized medicine, health was a community and personal responsibility. You knew your body. You knew the plants and practices that your community used. The healer was a guide, not an authority. Knowledge was shared, not gate-kept. Then came the professionalization of medicine in the early 20th century. The Flexner Report in the US in 1910 standardized medical education and systematically eliminated medical schools that taught nutrition, herbal medicine, and preventative practices. The hospital became the center of healthcare. The physician became the sole authority, and the patient became the recipient of care, not a participant in it. Then came the pharmaceutical revolution of the mid-20th century. Medication that genuinely saved lives. Antibiotics, insulin, antihypertensives, extraordinary advances. But alongside them, a business model. Patent a molecule. Create a market for it. Maintain that market by keeping the conversation at the level of the molecule, not the lifestyle pattern underneath it. There's no patent on sleep recalibration. There's no patent on nervous system regulation. And there is no patent on health literacy or self-advocacy or teaching someone to comprehend their own cortisol response. But there is an enormous market for the consequences of those things being absent. I am not suggesting conspiracy. I'm pointing at economics. When the most profitable outcome is a returning patient on a long-term prescription, that is the outcome the system is structurally oriented towards producing. Not your recovery, your management. So as a patient, what do you actually do? Or as a doctor, you cannot fix the system from inside your own consultation room, but you can opt out of the passive patient role entirely. And here's what that actually looks like. First, reclaim your own health data. Request your records. Request your blood results. Learn to read them or find someone who will teach you. Your pathology is yours. Your history is yours. You are entitled to comprehend every item in your file. Second, learn the difference between a symptom and a signal. A symptom is what the system treats. A signal is what your body is communicating. A headache is a symptom. What is the signal? Dehydration, tension, sleep disruption, blood sugar instability, chronic low-grade stress. When you get to the signal, you are addressing a cause. When you stay at the symptom, you are managing a consequence indefinitely. Third, take your nervous system seriously. Your physical health and your nervous system are not separate. A body in a chronic threat response produces inflammation, hormonal dysregulation, metabolic disruption, and immune suppression. These do show up on blood tests, but they get treated as separate conditions. They are not. They are one pattern system, and the pattern can be recalibrated. Fourth, learn to advocate in the room. Before any appointment, prepare 3 questions, not 12, just 3. 1, what is this symptom telling us about what is happening upstream? 2, what are the options, including non-pharmacological ones? And 3, what does improvement actually look like and how do we measure it? Those 3 questions change the nature of every consultation you will ever have. Fifth, stop treating your body as a problem to be fixed and start treating it as a system to be comprehended. Your body is not malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it learned to do, given the inputs it received and the environment it is operating in. That is brilliant and adaptive. And it is able to be recalibrated. The bottom line, the medical system is extraordinarily good at acute care, life-saving. It is structurally poor at creating the conditions for people to be genuinely well-informed and self-determining of their own health. That is not your doctor's fault. It is the architecture of the system. But you are not required to remain a passenger in it. You can become an unpatient, not someone who rejects medicine, someone who shows up to it as an informed, capable participant, someone who comprehends the language of their own health, someone who can advocate in the room, read between the lines of a prescription pad, and make decisions that are actually aligned with their own biology and values. That is not extreme. That is baseline. What is extreme is spending decades feeling managed, medicated, and quietly dependent on a system that was never designed to return you to genuine function. I see people recalibrate this all the time. Former patients who spent years cycling through referrals, who finally comprehend the pattern underneath. And I can help them with that now because I have the skills. Doctors who've been so deep inside the system, they forgot their own body's signals. High performers who have every external marker of success and cannot comprehend why they feel so internally unstable. When people shift from outsourcing to insourcing, everything changes. Not because they've found the magic protocol, but because they've stopped handing the authority over their own body to a system that was never designed to hold it properly. If that resonates, I want you to do two things. Share this video link. Send it to anyone you know who feels like they have been managed rather than helped, who keeps returning to the same consultation with the same unresolved problem. Because most people have no framework for this. They think it is their fault. They think they are not trying hard enough or not healthy enough or not compliant enough. They are non-compliant patients, according to their doctors. But they have not been shown that the system itself is the pattern. And if you want a structured way to start building health literacy and self-advocacy skills, the link below will take you to my health clarity and advocacy pathway at Wellbeing Holistic. It is non-clinical, practical, and built entirely around returning the authority over your health to you. That is the whole project.